Why do the biggest moments in America feel familiar, like we've already seen them? Because we have. Cinema turned dust into dreams, fear into villains, and hope into heroes. From Oz to The Dark Knight, from Taxi Driver to Forrest Gump, tonight we decode how films didn't just mirror America, they moved it. Enjoy stories where movies meet history? Hit like, subscribe, and let's roll the next frame together. Through the silver screen, America's story unfolds. Have you ever wondered how a simple movie can transport you through decades of American history, capturing the hopes, fears, and dreams of an entire nation? From the dusty plains of Kansas in The Wizard of Oz to the bustling streets of New York in Friends, cinema has long served as a powerful lens, reflecting and shaping the American experience. Today, we dive into how iconic films not only entertain, but also document pivotal moments, technological breakthroughs, and the everyday rhythms of life, offering a unique window into the soul of the USA. Join us on this journey to uncover the stories behind the stories, where fantasy meets reality and history comes alive on screen. There's a palpable ache in the air, a quiet desperation that settles like fine dust on everything you own. It's the 1930s, and the world has seemingly lost its color. Hope is a rationed commodity, and dreams are a luxury few can afford. This is the America that greets you in the opening frames of a film. A sepia-toned Kansas landscape so dreamed of vibrancy, it feels less like a place and more like a state of mind. Echoes of history, movies as time capsules. The genius of The Wizard of Oz, released in 1939, was not just its story, but its profound understanding of the national mood. The monochrome world Dorothy inhabits is a direct reflection of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl crisis that had ravaged the American heartland. It's a visual metaphor for a country holding its breath, waiting for a storm to pass or a miracle to arrive. And then the miracle happens. Dorothy opens the door of her crash-landed house, and the screen explodes with life. This wasn't just a technical trick, it was a promise delivered in Technicolor. The shift from the muted browns of Kansas to the brilliant hues of the Land of Oz was a seismic cultural event. For the price of a movie ticket, audiences were transported from a world of hardship to one of possibility. The yellow brick road became a symbolic path to recovery, and the Emerald City a glittering stand-in for the idealized prosperous future promised by programs like the New Deal. The film didn't just tell a fairy tale, it captured a collective yearning for escape and renewal, bottling the specific anxieties and aspirations of its time. Decades later, in 1994, another film offered a different kind of time travel. Forrest Gump didn't create a fantasy world to escape to. It dropped its fictional hero directly into our own recorded past. Imagine the scene. A young Forrest, earnest and unassuming, stands in the White House. He turns to President John F. Kennedy and, after drinking about 15 Dr. Pepper sodas, delivers the unforgettable line, "I gotta pee." Through the magic of digital compositing, a technology pioneered by effects houses like Industrial Light and Magic, actor Tom Hanks was seamlessly inserted into authentic archival footage. He shakes hands not with an actor, but with the ghost of a president. This technique was revolutionary. It dissolved the barrier between fiction and historical record, allowing a single ordinary man's journey to intersect with the grand sweeping narrative of 20th century America. Forrest is present for everything. He inadvertently exposes the Watergate break-in by complaining about flashlights across the way. He stands beside Governor George Wallace during the stand in the schoolhouse door incident at the University of Alabama in 1963. He meets Presidents Johnson and Nixon. By placing this everyman at the epicenter of these monumental events, the film made history deeply personal. The Vietnam War is no longer a distant conflict on the news.
It's a terrifying jungle where Forrest is desperately trying to save his best friend, Bubba. The film became a living scrapbook, a nostalgic and sometimes simplified lens through which millions could re-experience, or learn about for the first time, the decades that shaped modern America. Societal mirrors, cinema and cultural shifts. Sometimes the camera turns away from historical events and focuses inward, capturing the anxieties simmering just beneath the surface of everyday life. Step into a lavish suburban home in 1967. A young man named Benjamin Braddock, fresh from college, drifts through his own graduation party like a ghost. He's the picture of success, yet he is drowning in uncertainty. A friend of his father pulls him aside, puts his hand on his shoulder, and offers one word of advice for the future: plastics. That single word from the graduate became an emblem for an entire generation's fears. Plastics represented not just a burgeoning industry, it symbolized a pre-packaged, artificial, and soulless future. It was the embodiment of the corporate conformity that the burgeoning counterculture movement was railing against. Benjamin's affair with the older, predatory Mrs. Robinson is not just a story of forbidden romance. It's a rebellion against the sterile, passionless world his parents represent. The film perfectly captured the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, of a generation caught between the suffocating expectations of the post-war boom and a desperate desire for something, anything, authentic. Just 9 years later, the lens shifts to a vision of America where the suburban anxieties of the graduate have curdled into urban decay. The setting is New York City in 1976, but it's not the city of gleaming skyscrapers. It's a nocturnal hellscape of rain-slicked streets, flickering neon signs, and steam rising from the sewers like breath from a monster. This is the world seen through the windshield of Travis Brickley in Taxi Driver.
A lonely, alienated Vietnam veteran, Travis is a walking embodiment of post-war trauma. He sees the city as a cesspool of moral filth and yearns for a real rain to come and wash the scum off the streets. The film is a raw, unflinching portrait of a society grappling with the psychological wounds of a divisive war and the economic decline of its cities. It reflects a deep-seated disillusionment, a feeling that the American system had failed its people. But this film's legacy extends beyond mere reflection. It crossed a terrifying boundary into reality. In 1981, a man named John Hinckley Jr. shot President Ronald Reagan and 3 others outside a Washington, D.C. hotel. During the investigation, it was revealed that Hinckley was pathologically obsessed with Taxi Driver and the young actress who starred in it, Jodie Foster. He orchestrated the assassination attempt in a twisted effort to impress her, mirroring Travis Bickle's own violent quest for recognition. Suddenly, a fictional character's alienation had fueled a real-world act of political violence, sparking a fierce national debate about the influence of media on behavior that continues to this day. It was a stark reminder that the stories we tell ourselves on screen are not always contained by the frame. Sometimes they bleed out into the world with devastating consequences. The camera, however, doesn't always need to capture grand historical moments or societal decay to tell America's story. Sometimes its most profound statements are made in the quiet, manufactured spaces of a soundstage, where the illusion of everyday life is meticulously crafted. Consider the most famous fictional apartment in television history. A spacious, purple-walled haven in Greenwich Village, complete with an iconic orange couch and a picture frame around the peephole. This was Monica Geller's apartment in the sitcom Friends, which premiered in 1994. For 10 years, this apartment was the nucleus of a universe for millions of viewers. It was a place of comfort, laughter, and unwavering companionship. It was also a complete and utter fantasy. The show was famously filmed not in New York, but on Stage 24 at the Warner Bros. Studio lot in Burbank, California. The exterior shots of the apartment building were real, filmed at the corner of Grove and Bedford Streets, but the sun-drenched, impossibly large living space within was a carefully constructed lie.
In the real New York City of the 1990s, a rent control department of that size, supposedly inherited from a grandmother, was the urban equivalent of a unicorn. A chef and a waitress, Monica and Rachel's initial professions, could never have afforded such a place. Yet this detail, often pointed out by critics and New Yorkers, was precisely the point. Friends wasn't selling reality. It was selling an idealized version of it. It presented a vision of young adulthood in the big city that was stripped of its financial anxieties and crushing loneliness. The characters worried about dating, careers, and being on a break, but never about making rent. This aspirational portrayal of urban life resonated deeply with a generation navigating the uncertainties of their own 20s. The show created a powerful cultural shorthand for a specific kind of American dream, one where community, not capital, was the most valuable asset, and your chosen family was always just across the hall. The fiction became a comforting reality for its audience, shaping their expectations of friendship and city living for years to come.
Just 4 years prior, another film had explored a different kind of American domestic fantasy, this time in the sprawling, snow-covered suburbs of Chicago. Home Alone, released in 1990, opens with a scene of pure, unadulterated chaos inside the McAllister home. The house itself is a character, a magnificent Georgian brick mansion that feels less like a family home and more like a private estate. It's a visual testament to the upper-middle-class prosperity of the late Reagan and early Bush era. The family is preparing for a Christmas trip to Paris, a casual luxury that immediately establishes their economic status. The sheer number of people, the frantic packing, and the overlapping dialogue create a sense of overwhelming but ultimately loving domesticity. When 8-year-old Kevin McAllister is accidentally left behind, the film transforms this symbol of affluence into a personal playground and, eventually, a fortress. Kevin's initial joy is a celebration of unchecked consumerism. He eats mountains of junk food, watches violent movies, and jumps on his parents' bed. This is the latchkey kid fantasy writ large. But as the bumbling wet bandits attempt to burglarize his home, the narrative shifts. Kevin uses his intimate knowledge of the house combined with a prodigious talent for Rube Goldberg-esque engineering to defend his territory. The elaborate traps he sets, the red-hot doorknob, the swinging paint cans, the strategically placed micro machines are more than just slapstick comedy. They represent the ingenuity of a child turning the mundane objects of suburban life into weapons of self-preservation. The film became a cultural touchstone, a perennial holiday classic that tapped into a dual fantasy: the childhood dream of absolute freedom and the very American ideal of defending one's home against intruders. The McAllister house became an iconic piece of cinematic real estate, a symbol of a particular kind of 1990s American dream, where even a child could be the king of his castle. While these films were crafting intricate illusions of American life, another was busy dismantling the very concept of illusion itself. In 1993, a cinematic tremor was felt around the world. The film was Jurassic Park, and its impact was less about the story it told and more about how it told it. The pivotal moment arrives early on. Paleontologists Alan Grant and Ellie Sadler are riding in a Jeep through a lush, prehistoric landscape when their driver, John Hammond, brings the vehicle to a stop. "Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sadler," he says, with a triumphant smile. "Welcome to Jurassic Park!" As the iconic John Williams score swells, the camera pans up to reveal a creature that until that moment had only existed in fossils and textbooks, a towering brachiosaurus, its long neck reaching for the leaves of the tall tree. The awe on the characters' faces was mirrored in every movie theater across the country. What audiences were seeing was not stop-motion animation or a man in a suit. It was a seamless blend of animatronics and, for the first time on such a scale, photorealistic computer-generated imagery.
The team at ILM, the same company that brought Forrest Gump's historical interactions to life, had achieved the impossible. They had resurrected dinosaurs. This wasn't just a special effect, it was a paradigm shift. The film shattered the boundaries of what was cinematically possible. The awe of seeing that first dinosaur was a shared global experience that heralded a new age of blockbuster filmmaking. From that point on, a director's imagination was no longer limited by physical reality. Any world, any creature, any spectacle could be brought to life with enough code and processing power. Jurassic Park didn't just tell a story about the dangers of playing God with genetics, it demonstrated Hollywood's own newfound divinity, its power to create breathtaking new realities on screen.
This power to create entire worlds from scratch had its roots in an earlier cinematic revolution, one that took place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. In 1977, when Star Wars first hit theaters, the film industry was in a very different place. The gritty, auteur-driven cinema of the early 70s, films like Taxi Driver and The French Connection, was the critical darling. Science fiction was largely considered a B-movie genre. George Lucas's space opera, with its laser swords, talking robots, and mystical force, was seen as a significant gamble. The studio, 20th Century Fox, was so nervous about its prospects that it initially released the film in just 32 theaters nationwide. The strategy was unconventional, relying almost entirely on audience reaction and word of mouth to build momentum. It was a risk that paid off on an astronomical scale. Theaters were mobbed, lines stretched around the block. The film was held over for weeks, then months. The limited release created a sense of urgency and discovery, turning a movie screening into a cultural event. This grassroots explosion of popularity fundamentally changed the business of Hollywood. It gave birth to the modern blockbuster model, a high-concept film, often with significant merchandising potential, that opens wide and aims to become a four-quadrant hit, appealing to males, females, under 25s, and over 25s. Star Wars proved that a film could be more than just a film. It could be a franchise, a universe of toys, books, and sequels. It shifted the industry's focus from the gritty realism of the new Hollywood era toward large-scale, effects-driven spectacle. The quiet success of a film in just 32 theaters sent the loudest possible message. The audience's appetite for escapism was boundless, and the new age of cinematic myth-making had begun. This impulse to build new mythologies was not limited to the cosmos. It was equally potent when turned inward, toward America's own foundational lore. For decades, the Western genre served as the nation's primary creation story, a cinematic canvas upon which the ideals of rugged individualism and manifest destiny were painted. In John Ford's 1956 masterpiece, The Searchers, John Wayne's Ethan Edwards is the archetype of this myth. He is a man of the wilderness, uncomfortable within the confines of civilization, yet essential to its protection. The film's iconic final shot, where Ethan stands at a doorway, framed between the dark interior of the home and the vast, untamed landscape outside, before turning and walking away, is a perfect visual summary of this heroic ideal. He is the eternal outsider who secures the future for others, but can never be a part of it. This was the America of legend, a place forged by solitary, morally resolute men who tamed the savage frontier. But as the nation grew more complex and self-critical, so too did its most cherished genre. By 1992, the heroic cowboy had been laid to rest. In Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, the myth is brutally deconstructed. Eastwood's character, William Money, is a retired gunslinger, a widower struggling to raise 2 children on a failing pig farm. He is not a noble warrior. He is a former drunk and a cold-blooded killer, haunted by the memory of the women and children he has murdered. When he takes on one last job, it is not for honor, but for money. The violence in the film is not stylized or heroic. It is clumsy, ugly, and pathetic. A gunfight in a saloon is not a ballet of quick draws, but a desperate, terrifying scramble.
The film strips away the romance of the Old West to reveal a world driven by greed, desperation, and the lingering trauma of violence. It was a Western for an America that had lost its innocence, a nation that could no longer see its own history in simple terms of black-hatted villains and white-hatted heroes.
This complicated relationship with the American dream, the promise of a better life versus the often brutal reality of achieving it, found its most potent expression in the story of the immigrant. In 1972, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather reframed the quintessential tale of upward mobility as a dark, operatic tragedy. The film opens at a wedding, a vibrant celebration of community and tradition in the New World. In his darkened study, away from the festivities, Don Vito Corleone holds court. He is the embodiment of a shadow government, a man who provides justice and security when the legitimate systems of America fail. He sought a legitimate life for his family, but the corrupt machinery of power forced him into the world of organized crime. The film is a profound meditation on the paradox of assimilation. The Corleone family's pursuit of power and acceptance is intrinsically tied to the violence they must commit to protect themselves. The most famous line, "I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse," is a chilling summary of their philosophy. Power that masquerades as choice. The true tragedy is embodied by Michael Corleone, the college-educated war hero who wants nothing to do with the family business. We watch as he is slowly, inexorably pulled into the darkness, sacrificing his own soul in his attempt to make the family legitimate. It is the American dream inverted, a story where achieving success means losing your humanity. While the Corleones battled for their place within America, a different kind of fear was gripping the nation from the outside. The Cold War cast a long, paranoid shadow over the post-war decades, and this ambient dread seeped into the nation's cinema, often in disguise. In Don Siegel's 1956 sci-fi horror classic, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the threat is not a foreign army, but a silent, insidious infiltration. Alien pod people replace the residents of a small town in California one by one. These duplicates look and sound exactly like their human counterparts, but they are devoid of all emotion, individuality, and passion. They are a collective, a hive mind. The film is a masterclass in paranoia, capturing the pervasive fear of the Red Scare. The enemy was no longer a uniformed soldier on a distant battlefield. It could be your neighbor, your friend, your spouse. The terror came from the inability to distinguish friend from foe, from the horrifying idea that the people you loved could be hollowed out and replaced by a soulless conformist. The protagonist's final, desperate stream directly into the camera was not just a warning to the other characters, it was a direct address to an audience terrified that their own society was being systematically stripped of its individualism. Decades later, the camera would turn to conflicts brewing not in the shadows of paranoia, but in the blistering heat of broad daylight. In the summer of 1989, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing dropped audiences onto a single block in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn on the hottest day of the year. The film is a pressure cooker of racial and cultural tension. The central conflict seems, on the surface, almost trivial. A young black man named Buggin' Out demands that Sal, the Italian-American owner of the local pizzeria, add pictures of black heroes to his Wall of Fame, which is exclusively populated by Italian-American icons like Frank Sinatra and Joe DiMaggio. Sal refuses, declaring, "This is my pizzeria." This small dispute becomes the flashpoint for years of simmering resentment, microaggressions, and cultural misunderstandings. Lee masterfully uses the oppressive heat as metaphor for the rising timbers. The camera angles are often canted, creating a sense of unease. Characters break the fourth wall to deliver a torrent of racial slurs directly to the audience, implicating everyone in the conflict.
The film famously ends with two quotes, one from Martin Luther King Jr. advocating nonviolence, and one from Malcolm X justifying violence in self-defense. By refusing to offer a simple answer or a clear moral victor, Lee forced America to confront its own racial dynamics in a way that few mainstream films ever had. It was a vibrant, angry, and deeply necessary conversation played out on screen.
As the new millennium dawned, the nature of America's fears shifted once again. The attacks of September 11, 2001, plunged the nation into a new era of anxiety, defined by an unseen, ideologically driven enemy and a creeping erosion of civil liberties in the name of security. This post-9/11 psyche found its ultimate cinematic expression not in a gritty war drama, but in a superhero film. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, 2008, was more than a comic book movie. It was a profound allegory for the war on terror. Heath Ledger's Joker is not a typical villain seeking money or power. He is an agent of chaos, a terrorist who wants to watch the world burn. His motivations are opaque, his methods terrifyingly unpredictable. He represents a new kind of enemy, one that cannot be reasoned with or bought. In response, Christian Bale's Batman is pushed to his ethical limits. To find the Joker, he creates a surveillance system that hijacks every cell phone in Gotham, effectively spying on the entire population. It is a direct parallel to the controversial Patriot Act and the debates over government surveillance that dominated the decade. The film's central question, how much freedom are we willing to sacrifice for safety, was the defining political question of its time. Lucius Fox, Batman's moral compass, agrees to help, but declares he will resign immediately after, stating the technology is too much power for one person. The Dark Knight captured the moral ambiguity of a nation at war with itself, grappling with the fear that, in order to defeat the monsters, it might have to become one. Reflecting and shaping the power of film, as we've seen, movies like Forrest Gump and Jurassic Park do more than entertain. They encapsulate America's journey from historical upheavals to technological marvels and the nuances of daily living. These stories remind us that cinema is a dynamic mirror, constantly reflecting and redefining what it means to be American. Thanks for exploring this vivid tapestry with us. May your next film night feel a little more profound.